You're lucky I didn't leave you at the hospital. That was the last thing my mother said to me the night I graduated from high school. I stood there in my polyester cap and gown, diploma still warm in my hand, my name, Rhea Collins, mispronounced just an hour earlier in front of a crowd of disinterested faces. But that sentence? That one, she delivered flawlessly. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I remember blinking slowly, tasting blood from the way I had bitten the inside of my cheek to stop myself from reacting. It was supposed to be a day of celebration. Something like a movie scene, maybe. A cheap dinner at a chain restaurant. A proud photo. You did it. But instead, it ended in silence and slammed doors. I went to bed that night with my gown crumpled at the foot of my mattress and my phone face down, ignored, though no one was texting anyway. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been made to feel like your very existence was a burden someone regretted carrying? If that question hit something tender inside you, I invite you to take a moment. Subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment with your time zone and where you're listening from. You're not alone. You're part of something here. Now, let's listen to my story journey. I grew up in a home where love was conditional. If I wasn't doing something useful, I was invisible. Or worse, in the way. My parents weren't abusive in the way people think. There were no bruises, no screaming matches heard through thin apartment walls. But the damage they did was quieter, more sophisticated. It was the kind of pain that looked like jokes, sarcasm, a sigh when I entered a room, a missed call on purpose. They called me too sensitive when I cried and lazy when I spent too long alone in my room. I was the youngest of 4, and by the time I came around, the novelty of parenting had worn off. My siblings had scattered like dry leaves in different cities, and I was left in a house that felt colder each year. I remember folding my own laundry at 10, cooking boxed mac and cheese at 11, and by 14 I'd learned to keep my voice quiet, my footsteps lighter, my needs invisible. I started working part-time at a diner during my last year of high school, just to save up a few $100s for whatever came after. College wasn't an option, not financially, not emotionally. Every time I brought it up, my mother would raise an eyebrow and say, "With what money? You think scholarships grow on trees?" So I didn't push. I learned to shrink my dreams to fit the space I was allowed to occupy. But something inside me, some reckless, persistent part, refused to die. After graduation, I packed my bags without fanfare. There was no goodbye, just a note on the kitchen table that read, "Thanks for raising me the best you could. I'll figure the rest out." And I left. I moved into a sublet room that was barely larger than a storage closet. The window looked out at a brick wall. The radiator hissed like it was angry to be alive. My roommate was a girl named Kia who chain-smoked and barely spoke English. But she left me alone and paid the rent on time, so we got along. I took a job as an office assistant for a small marketing agency. I had no real skills, just a decent typing speed and the ability to make great coffee. I told them I was good with people. I lied. But I was good at reading them, which turned out to be even more useful. The job was a parade of humiliations I smiled through. I cleaned microwaves that weren't mine, fetched salads with dressing on the side, and was once yelled at for not knowing the CEO's dog had a gluten allergy. I ate lunch in a storage room between shelves of expired toner and dusty binders because I didn't know how to talk to anyone. But every single day, I was on time. I stayed late. I volunteered for things no one else wanted to do. I watched. I listened. I took notes, not just of meetings, but of people. Their moods, their power plays, the way they used language like currency. Sometimes I'd see a woman in a sleek pantsuit walk by the glass wall of the conference room, head high, heels clicking like punctuation marks. I didn't want her job. I wanted her freedom. The kind that radiated from her like perfume. The kind that said, I don't need to ask for permission anymore. Back in my little room, I started collecting things. Not items, ideas, tools, skills. I took free classes online, scribbled marketing terms in a notebook, and watched YouTube videos on everything from how to write copy to how to pitch clients. It was lonely, exhausting, invisible work. And yet, I felt more alive than I ever had. Still, every Sunday without fail, my mother would text me one word. Well? Not how are you, not I miss you, not I'm proud of you. Just that one word. A demand for proof that I wasn't failing, that her decision to push me out of her life had been justified. I never replied. Not once, but I read every single message, and I let it burn. There's a particular smell to toner ink when it's been sitting on a shelf too long. Sharp, stale, almost metallic. I remember it clearly because for nearly a year, I ate my lunch beside those forgotten cartridges, perched on an overturned storage bin, careful not to spill anything on the files marked Archive Do Not Touch. No one asked where I disappeared to at noon. They assumed I liked being alone or that I had friends somewhere else. The truth was simpler and sadder. I didn't know how to belong. The office had a rhythm I couldn't match. Chatter at the break room, after-work drinks, inside jokes exchanged over Slack. I hovered at the edge of it all like an echo in a room no one noticed had gone quiet. I became the girl people asked to refill the Keurig pods, the one they called when the office printer jammed. I was even once asked to take someone's dry cleaning to the street vendor because you pass it on your way home, right? I didn't live anywhere near that street, but I smiled. I nodded. I said yes, not because I was weak, but because I was watching. I learned the hierarchy of whispers. The real meetings happened after the scheduled ones, behind closed doors or in the quiet lull between two calendar blocks. I knew who hated who was angling for a promotion, and who cried in the bathroom at 4:45 every Friday because she thought no one could hear her. And while I filed papers and fetched gluten-free granola bars, I studied the company's campaigns. I tracked what worked. I rewrote their client copy in a notebook at night, wondering why no one ever said what needed to be said with teeth. Why did everything sound like beige wallpaper? Then, one Thursday, something happened that changed me. I was late delivering coffee to a client meeting. Not by much, maybe 3 minutes, but long enough that when I entered the room, all eyes turned to me. I wasn't supposed to be seen. I was just the assistant. But this time, the client, some startup founder with an ego you could park a yacht on, looked me over and said, "Did you mess up my order? Or do you just look like someone who gets things wrong?" The silence that followed wasn't the shocked kind. It was complicit, comfortable. Everyone chuckled. Even my supervisor smirked behind her laptop. I said nothing. My fingers tightened around the tray. My face burned. And I nodded like the good little ghost they expected me to be. But something broke inside me. Not loudly. Not with some Hollywood-style declaration. Just a quiet crack. Like ice shifting beneath a frozen river. That night, I didn't go home right away. I sat on a bench outside a closed bookstore and watched people rush past, full of conversations and purpose and colors I didn't feel like I had permission to wear. I opened my phone and started typing. No plan, no structure. Just rage turned into words. I rewrote the copy from that morning's presentation, but this time, I made it bite. I gave it edge, clarity, realness. Then I created a dummy email account and sent it to the agency's submission inbox anonymously, under the subject line, "What you should have said." I expected nothing. But the next day, I overheard the team lead reading it out loud, half laughing, half wowed. "This is better than what we paid for," he muttered. Who wrote this? No one knew, and I didn't tell. But I kept writing, quietly, anonymously. Over the next few months, I submitted 10 more fake pitches under fake names. They used 2 of them. One went viral. The team celebrated over catered cupcakes. I ate my peanut butter sandwich next to the toner. And yet, I smiled. Because I knew. I was done waiting for someone to call me talented. I didn't need a stage. I just needed the work to speak loud enough that people couldn't ignore it forever. One night, after another long shift of filing invoices and wiping down conference tables after a celebration I wasn't invited to, I sat on the floor of my room and opened my old laptop. Secondhand, glitchy, always overheating. I opened a blank document and typed in a name. A company name. Mine. It wasn't flashy. Just 3 words I liked the sound of. But it was mine. I registered the domain. I built a basic portfolio with mock-ups and ideas that hadn't yet seen the light of day. No photo, no bio, just work. And slowly I started reaching out to small businesses, mom and pop shops, Etsy sellers, independent cafes. Anyone who couldn't afford a big agency but knew they needed to sound better, look sharper, stand taller. Most didn't reply. A few told me to get lost, but one, just one, said yes. It was a tea shop run by a woman named Elsie, who was 63 and had never run an ad in her life. I charged her $100 for a full website rewrite and 2 weeks of content. She sent me an envelope of cash and a handwritten note that said, "You made me feel like I mattered." I cried over that note. Because for the first time in my life, I felt like maybe I did too. I keep the note from Elsie in the back of my wallet. It's creased and faded now. The ink smudged from my fingers and maybe from a few tears too. But I still read it on the days I feel like I'm slipping into someone else's story instead of living my own. The moment I chose to write that fake campaign email, I think that was the day I stopped trying to earn their approval. Their, meaning my old coworkers, my mother, the world in general. I realized no matter how many Keurig pods I stocked, no one was going to tap me on the shoulder and say, "Now you matter." I had to claim it. Alone. And I was tested. Hard. A few months after I landed Elsie as my first client, I got caught. Not by my agency, not for the ghostwriting. I was too careful for that. But I got caught working on my side business during my lunch breaks. A nosy mid-level manager walked in while I was sending an invoice from my phone in the kitchen. She tilted her head, scanned the screen, and said in that sugary, passive-aggressive tone HR people master so well, "Working on something that isn't company-related, hun?" I wanted to lie, to smile, apologize, and swallow the humiliation like a vitamin. But I didn't. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Yes." She blinked. I blinked back. The next morning, I was summoned to the director's office. The air inside smelled like fake lemon cleaner and stale authority. I sat down across from a man I had fetched countless coffees for, stapled reports for, smiled politely at during birthdays where I wasn't invited to eat cake. He folded his hands and gave me the lecture. Company loyalty. Misuse of company time. Conflict of interest. He said, "You're not irreplaceable, you know that, right?" I nodded once. "Yes, I do." He was taken aback. That wasn't the reaction he wanted. Then he leaned in and said, "You want to be someone? Fine, but not on our time. Clean out your desk." Just like that. No thank you for 2 years of silent servitude. No goodbye card. Not even a security escort. I walked out of that office without looking back, carrying a cardboard box that held the remnants of a life I never really wanted. A broken mug, a half-used notebook, and the granola bar I hadn't eaten the day before. I should have felt panic. Instead, I felt still. I went home and cried, not because I was afraid, because I was free. And once I'd cried all the salt out of my body, I got up, made tea, and opened my laptop. I emailed Elsie and asked if she knew anyone else who might need help. She replied with 4 names. I reached out to all of them. 3 replied. 2 said yes. 1 gave me a referral that changed everything. That referral was a boutique fashion brand run by a fierce woman named Carolina. She had wild curls, wore red lipstick like armor, and swore like a pirate. But she believed in small teams and big voices. She couldn't afford much at first, but what she gave me was credibility. Real, tangible, scrollable proof that my work had value. She put my logo at the bottom of every campaign and shouted me out on social media whenever sales spiked. Suddenly, my inbox wasn't so empty anymore. I stopped calling it a side hustle. I gave it a real name, a real website. I hired a freelance designer to make it look clean, grown up, like it belonged in the room. I learned to file taxes, to negotiate contracts, to price myself without apology. And I worked. God, I worked. 12-hour days, weekends, holidays. I ate meals at my desk, fell asleep with my laptop open, and forgot what it felt like to sit still without guilt. But I was building something no one could take away from me. And through it all, I heard nothing from my family. No calls, no apologies, not even the passive-aggressive "well" texts. I thought maybe they had finally cut the cord, that I could move forward without ever looking back. But life isn't a clean line. It circles, it tests, it knows where your scars live. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, just as I finished a call with a new client, my phone buzzed. It was my older sister. We hadn't spoken in nearly 5 years. The message was short. "Hey, Mom's not doing well. She's asking about you." Just like that, the ache returned. Not because I missed them, but because even now, they only reached for me when something was broken, when they thought I could fix it. Or when they finally saw I was no longer a burden, but an asset. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I turned off my phone, closed my laptop, and stepped outside into the rain with no umbrella, letting it wash everything I couldn't say off my skin. I didn't reply. Not yet. I used to think forgiveness was something you had to feel before you could give it. That there'd be this rush of light, some emotional wave where you suddenly understood why someone hurt you, and it all made sense. But now, standing in the eye of the life I was building, I realized forgiveness wasn't some sacred ceremony. Sometimes it was just a quiet decision not to let bitterness write your next sentence. So I didn't answer my sister's message. Instead, I answered an email. It was from a woman who ran a regional magazine for women entrepreneurs. She said she'd seen Carolina's latest campaign and wanted to interview the voice behind the brand. She asked if I could talk about how I started. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes, hands frozen over the keyboard. Because I hadn't started? Not really. Not with a vision board, not with funding, not with some TED Talk-worthy revelation. I started because I was humiliated in front of a stranger with a chai latte and decided I was done being invisible. But I said yes. I did the interview, fumbling through it in a cafe bathroom with better lighting and worse Wi-Fi. I told the truth. I didn't come from money. I didn't have an MBA, and I built everything from YouTube, grit, and spite. And people listened. Emails started trickling in, then pouring. Women saying they'd felt the same shame, the same silence, the same rooms where their voices felt too sharp or too soft. One woman wrote, "I haven't told anyone, but I left my husband last month. I've been sleeping on my sister's couch, and your story made me believe I can start over." I didn't know what to do with that kind of weight, so I did the only thing I could. I kept going. I hired my first contractor, then my second. I moved out of the shared flat with Kia and rented a 1-bedroom that didn't smell like mildew. It had sunlight and a window that faced the street. I bought myself a desk, a real one, not a folding table. I lit a candle every night before sitting down as if to remind myself, this is sacred now. And then one day I looked up from my screen and I had employees. A team. A Slack channel buzzing with energy. A tiny office space in a co-working building downtown with plants that didn't die after a week. I had a company. No loans. No partners. Just me and the people who believed in the work enough to join it. And then came the milestone I never saw coming. A campaign we designed for a mental health initiative went viral. Like, actual trending topics viral. Celebrities reposted it. College counselors printed it out and taped it to walls. The initiative founder called me crying, saying we'd saved lives. That's when the calls started coming in. Agencies that once wouldn't hire me now asked to collaborate. Executives who once had me clean up their takeout messes now followed me on LinkedIn, using words like visionary and trailblazer like they had always known. And then, one morning, as I was eating toast in my kitchen, barefoot in an old hoodie, I got the email. Subject: Forbes Women in Leadership, CEO Spotlight Inquiry. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk. Not because I needed air, because I needed to cry. Not the heaving, wounded kind, but the stunned, disoriented, heart-thudding realization that the thing they said would never happen was happening. They had called me a burden, said I'd never make anything of myself. And now, Forbes was asking if they could put my face next to the word CEO. The photo shoot was surreal. They sent a stylist, a makeup artist, someone to coach my posture. I wore a black suit I'd bought secondhand and had tailored to perfection. Standing in front of that white backdrop with a soft box glaring in my face, I realized I didn't look like a girl who ate alone next to toner ink anymore. I looked like a woman who knew her worth. The feature dropped a week later. My inbox crashed. My company's website got so many hits it froze. We doubled our client list in 3 days. I had to turn people away. And that was when my mother called. Not a text, not a voice note, an actual call. It rang while I was in the office, sitting across from a junior copywriter who'd just presented their first successful pitch. I saw her name flash on the screen like a ghost from a past life. I didn't answer, but I stared at the name. I'd waited years for that name to show up with something different behind it. An apology, a question, maybe even pride. But when I finally listened to the voicemail, it was exactly what I expected. I saw the article. You should have told us. We're still your family. We deserve to know when big things happen in your life. I laughed. Out loud. Not because it was funny, but because of the word she chose. Deserve? As if she had earned a seat at the table I had built from scratch. As if calling me a burden was just a chapter she could edit out now that I was useful. I didn't call back. Not yet. But I saved the voicemail. Because someday, I would need to remember exactly what the turning point sounded like. I kept the voicemail saved, tucked away like a loose thread I refused to tie back into the fabric of my new life. I played it once, maybe twice. Each time, her voice sounded smaller. Not weak, but less powerful. As if success had shrunk her pedestal rather than lifting her closer to me. What struck me most was that she hadn't said congratulations. Not once. Not, I'm proud of you. Just, we deserve to know. But there had never been a we. Not really. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because I had nothing left to prove. I had a keynote to prepare. My company had just been invited to pitch for a national campaign. I had 3 new hires to onboard and an interview with a venture firm that, ironically, I wasn't even sure I needed anymore. Still, they called. And not just her. My sister texted me again, this time with a photo. Our parents sitting together on a porch I didn't recognize. They looked older, smaller than I remembered. Mom said to ask if you could help with the house. They're thinking of downsizing. Maybe you could talk to a broker for them? Since you have connections now. Connections. That was their new word for me. Not daughter, not baby sister. Just an asset. Like I was some tool they'd left rusting in the attic until they needed to fix something. But the thing is, by now I knew the game, and I had built my own rules. So I did something strange. Something I didn't think I'd ever do. I called her back. I waited until the end of the day, after the office had emptied out, and the sun spilled gold across my desk like a quiet kind of glory. I pressed the call button, put the phone to my ear, and listened to the ringing stretch out. When she picked up, her voice was tight with surprise. "Hello? It's me," I said. "You wanted to talk?" There was a pause. "Yes. Well, I wasn't sure if you'd call." "You didn't leave much room for choice," I said calmly. Not cruel, just honest. "Well," she replied, clearing her throat, "you've certainly made a name for yourself. We've seen the articles." "I know," I said. "That's why you're calling." More silence. Then, the pivot I expected. "Your father's not well. He won't say it, but he misses you." I let that hang. I wasn't cold, but I wasn't warm either. "Do you miss me?" I asked. She didn't answer that. Instead, she said, "It would be nice if we could all sit down, talk things through. Maybe start over." Start over. As if you could rewind 2 decades and write a softer version. As if you could erase "you're lucky I didn't leave you at the hospital." As if you could erase every burden whispered behind doors I wasn't meant to hear. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said, "Why now?" And she said the most honest thing she's ever said to me. "Because now we see what you've become, and it's hard to ignore." I breathed in through my nose, out through my mouth. "That's the problem," I said. "You only ever saw me when I became useful, not when I needed to be loved." She tried to interrupt. I didn't let her. "I'm not angry," I continued. "Not anymore. But I don't owe you my success, and I'm not going to turn it into a currency you can cash in now that it's real." Silence. Then she said softly, "I didn't know you felt that way. You never asked." That call lasted 7 minutes. It ended with me saying goodbye, not bitterly, not dramatically, just goodbye. And after I hung up, I sat very still. Because I had always imagined that moment, the confrontation, the confession, the clean cut of a final word. But in truth, it wasn't a climax. It was a release, a knot that slowly loosened. That night, I received a message on LinkedIn from a woman in another country. She was a single mother, had lost her job in the pandemic, and was trying to start over with a business no one believed in. She wrote, "I don't know you, but I read your story, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was drowning." I replied. I told her what I wish someone had told me in the beginning. "You are not a burden. You are a blueprint. And you don't need permission to build something beautiful out of your broken pieces." The morning of the Forbes interview, I wake before my alarm. It's not nerves. It's muscle memory. My body still thinks I need to hustle harder, prove more, carry something heavy. But today, there's no weight on my back. Only a stillness that feels earned. The makeup artist arrives at 7:00 a.m. sharp. She's sweet, all soft-spoken questions and gentle brushes, but I can tell she's used to hiding people's fatigue, their stress, their age. When she's done, I look in the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back. Not because she's polished, because she's sure. The film crew sets up in the main office, light stands, camera gear, a boom mic hovering like a halo above my head. They want to shoot B-roll of me working. I laugh and pretend to type while they circle me like I'm something precious. The interviewer is young, smart eyes, fast with her notes. She asks about strategy, growth, vision. But then, about halfway through, she leans forward and asks quietly, "Do you ever wish your family could see you now?" It's not a trap. She's not trying to make me cry. She's just curious. I pause. Not because I don't know the answer, but because the answer has changed. "I think they do see me now," I say. "They just don't know who they're looking at." She smiles, nods, writes that down like it matters. We finish the shoot with a walk around the building. They film me opening doors, shaking hands, smiling with staff. I keep thinking of that old toner closet, of eating lunches next to broken chairs and pretending I was full. Now there's an espresso machine in my office, and a drawer full of protein bars I don't have to ration. As the crew packs up, my assistant pops in to tell me I have a call, someone from a partner company overseas. I nod, thank her, and walk back into my glass-walled office with its view of the skyline. But when I pick up the phone, it's not the partner. It's her, my mother, calling from a number I don't recognize. At first, I think it's a mistake. I nearly hang up. But something in me says, "Just listen." Her voice is small, measured, almost rehearsed. "I saw the interview," she says. I say nothing. Let her sit in the silence. "You looked powerful." Still nothing. "I wanted to say," she continues, "I didn't know what you were becoming. I didn't know I was wrong. About you. About everything." I close my eyes. Let the words settle like dust after an earthquake. "I used to be afraid of what would happen if you left," she admits. "I thought you'd fail, and I didn't want to watch that. But you didn't. You flew." It's not a perfect apology, but it's not nothing. So I say, "Thank you." There's a long pause. Then, "Do you think we could talk sometime?" Not about the past, just about now. I look out at the skyline, at the city that raised me better than she did, at the building with my name on the lease, at the team I built without handouts, at the woman I've become, and I think, maybe, not because she deserves it, but because I do. Because letting go isn't about making peace with the past. It's about freeing yourself to live in the present. "I'll think about it," I say. "And if I do call, it won't be to fix anything, just to say hello." She whispers, "That would be enough." We end the call quietly. No declarations, no sobs, and I sit back in my chair, heart steady. The camera crew is long gone, but for the first time in years I feel seen. Not by the world, by myself. 2 weeks after the Forbes feature drops, I walk into a bookstore I used to visit when I first moved out. Back then, I'd sneak in after work. Not to buy anything. I couldn't afford even the discount shelf. But just to stand between the stacks and pretend I belonged in the stories. Now, the owner recognizes me, not from the article, but from the tea shop I helped years ago. "You're the one who helped Elsie's website take off," she says with a warm grin. "She still talks about you." I smile, nod, take it in. Because that's the legacy that matters. Not the magazine covers, not the panels, not even the title on my business card. It's the people, the quiet ones, the dismissed, the ones like me. Outside, the city is humming. I remember the first time I stood at this same corner, hands trembling, trying to decide if I could afford to eat and take the subway. I remember my too thin coat, my cracked phone screen, the voice in my head whispering, "You'll never make it." But I did. Not in spite of being called a burden, but because I refused to believe it. My success wasn't built on revenge. It was built on clarity. It was built on late nights and kindness. On believing that I mattered, even when no one else said it out loud. On turning pain into precision, rejection into fuel, silence into strategy. Later that evening, I get an email. It's from a nonprofit offering to name me their keynote speaker for an event called Rise from the Ashes. They want me to talk about resilience, about family, about how to move forward when the people who were supposed to love you didn't know how. I say yes. Not for recognition, but because if even one woman in that room hears my story and thinks, maybe I'm not broken, maybe I'm just beginning, then all of it, every tear, every silent lunch, every unanswered text will have been worth it. The night of the speech, I step on stage in front of a crowd of hundreds. Lights warm my skin. My heart thuds once, twice, and then settles. I take a breath. I look out at the audience, not to impress them, but to see them. All those faces, all those hearts. The younger version of me is probably sitting somewhere in the back row, knees tucked to her chest, trying to be invisible. So I speak directly to her. I say, "You are not too much. You are not too late. And you are definitely not a burden." The crowd is silent, holding its breath. Then I smile. Soft, steady, whole. You are the beginning of something no one sees coming, including you. I step off stage to the sound of applause that doesn't feel loud. It feels real. And later, when the night has settled and the lights have gone dim, I pull out that old note from Elsie, still tucked behind my driver's license. I read it one last time. "You made me feel like I mattered. And now, I do too. Not because of what I've achieved, but because I've become someone who no longer asks for a seat at the table. I build the damn table. And I make sure there's room at it for everyone who was ever told they didn't belong. My family called me a burden, but Forbes named me CEO. And more importantly, I name myself worthy."